This Choircast podcast is brought to you by the Quantum Sayings of Jesus, Decoding the Lost Gospel of Thomas by Keith Giles, available now on Amazon in Kindle and paperback. Buried around 340 AD, unearthed in 1945, and translated into English in 1959, the Gospel of Thomas has been studied, debated, and analyzed by dozens of scholars and historians searching for clues about the meaning of these cryptic sayings of Jesus. In the Quantum Sayings of Jesus, author Keith Giles offers a look at the text from the perspective of non-duality and divine oneness. Check it out on Amazon today.
Welcome to the Unbelief Podcast, your journey, actually our journey together beyond inherited beliefs to a spirituality that works for you. I'm your host, Jeremy. I'm a deep skeptic, also a pastor. We can fix that later, right? No? Damn. You have made it to another book club episode of the Unbelief Podcast, and a little content warning today. One of the stories that we're talking about from the Bible contains sexual assault, very violent. And so if you are triggered by that kind of story, just skip this podcast. Take care of yourself. We are starting back in the book of Genesis, the book of beginnings, and we are in chapter 18, which is going to lead us into the story of Sodom and Gommorah. But it's set up by this really interesting story in the first handful of verses of chapter 18. In chapter 18, it begins with this. It says that Abraham is sitting by the oaks. He's sitting out there, and it says he looks up and he saw three men standing near him. Now, this double verb, the look up and saw, that is this sort of Hebrew way of saying, hey, this is significant. Something really big is going to happen here. And he sees three men. Now, it appears that these three men are impressive right away. And maybe they're royal, maybe they're giant, but it's actually three angels. But whatever it is, Abraham groks really quickly that these are important people. And there is this sort of hurriedness about what comes next. He says, okay, let's come, let us wash your feet. Let us do all the things. He shows a lot of hospitality to these men. He goes, he says to his wife, get 3 seahs of flour and make bread with them. Just to give you a sense of what that is, a seah is 2 gallons. So that's 6 gallons of wheat, which makes a whole lot of bread. It's also a lot to ask of your spouse to do right at the last minute. But so it's interesting. Sarah is actually not going to be able to come out and greet the visitors or be around them because she's going to be baking for the next while. And then it says that he comes out, he gets a calf, Abraham. And again, in the modern world, we have a hard time understanding exactly what all this stuff means and the scale of it. If you are a cattle farmer, you might get a sense of this, but just for all of us who are not sort of well-versed on how much meat that is, one calf will feed one person for an entire year, okay? So we've got this massive feast. This is the kind of feast that people prepare for royalty. We actually see very similar things happen in different parts of the Bible with royalty, with actual royalty. And so this is just this way over the top hospitality that Abraham is showing these 3 visitors. And it gives us a sense that Abraham understands something significant is happening here, which is echoed by the double verb right there at the beginning. And they sit down to eat, and they say, wait, where's your wife, Sarah? Which is funny. And by the way, this story has a lot of humor. A lot of times when we read ancient spiritual texts like the Bible, we read them very seriously, and everything that takes place is serious face. This story, especially here at the end, is absolutely hilarious, right? Where's your wife, Sarah? Well, I told her to get 6 gallons of wheat and make that much bread. So she's in the tent. It's a funny question. He says, oh, she's there in the tent. And then we have a serious moment, right? I will surely return to you, one of the men who we now understand is an angel. And eventually what you see often in the Old Testament, in the scripture of the Bible, it does this interplay when there's an angel. Sometimes it'll be the angel speaking. Sometimes it'll say God spoke, because the angels are sort of the mouthpiece of God, right? And we'll see that here and in some other places. But that's what happens here. It says, the angel says, God says, I will surely return to you in due season, and your wife, Sarah, shall have a son. And now it says, Sarah was listening at the tent entrance behind them. And this is the beginning of some humorous things, right? Sarah laughs. But it's interesting because, but before we get to her laughing, it gives us a little bit, she's old, right? And it says in the New Revised Standard Updated Edition, it says they were old, advanced in age. It says it had ceased to be with Sarah after the manner of women. Now, that sort of highlights something that we've talked about before, and that is the difficulty of translating ancient texts into modern language. You're always making decisions of what you're going to do when it comes to the actual words, right? You can go word for word and say like this word, then this word, then this word. We're going to translate each word specifically, each word correctly. You might actually get a phrase and say, this phrase has a correlation to another phrase in English. So sometimes it will be like a phrase that will be translated. Each of those words won't be translated individually, because if you translated them individually, it would not make sense. And then there are idioms. There are ways that people say stuff like, I'm not a spring chicken in English, right? That means somebody is not young anymore. But if you translate that into another language, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And so sometimes a translation will take even those idioms and translate them into modern idioms. The Message translation, and I say translation because it comes from the original texts, but it is very much also a paraphrase, because it does this famously in the book of John. The original word for word, it says, then the word came down and tabernacled among us. That doesn't make a lot of sense in modern English. And so the Message will take and it will translate those idioms into modern idioms. And so instead of saying the word came down and tabernacled among us, it says moved into the neighborhood, which is a much more modern way of saying that. It makes it more readable, more understandable. But the New Revised Standard Updated Edition is very much concerned with accuracy. And even when it doesn't come across, when the idiom doesn't come across well, they're going to put the actual words in there. And then you're going to have to figure it out, which is why you get a Bible that is a study Bible, or if something sounds weird, you might go to a translation that translates idioms differently. And this is one of those. It says it had ceased to be with Sarah after the manner of women. And what that means is that she was post-menopausal. She had completed menopause. She can't have children. And it says, so Sarah laughed to herself, saying, after I have grown old and my husband is old, shall I be fruitful? And it said, and so she says this to herself. This is not something that we're expecting the other people to hear. She sort of chuckles and says, wait, hang on. After I'm so old and Abraham, this is ridiculous. But then the Lord says to Abraham, why does Sarah laugh and say, which this is, again, some of the humor. This is a story. This is a little story about laughter. So it's going to be funny. Because Sarah was listening in on them, but it turns out God was listening in on her. And then she denies it. She says, I did not laugh. And then God denies her. He says, yes, you did. Right. And I don't know. I love this little vignette because it's really funny. Like, she's listening in. God's listening in on her. I didn't laugh. Oh, yes, you did. Oh, no, I didn't. Yeah. And so that sort of is this introduction to this, and right there at the end in verse 14, before the little comedic flourish right there in verse 15 with the denying and denying, it says on the lips of God, the angels, is anything too wonderful for the Lord? And this is interesting. Another way to translate that is anything too difficult for the Lord? But I like the nuance of the way it's said here in this translation that is a little more accurate, because it's not, is anything too hard? It's like, is there anything so amazing and wonderful that you think God wouldn't do that? It's like when you think of like the wonderful things that could happen, man, is anything too wonderful for God? It sort of is implying that God is wanting to do good things for people. God is wanting to do good things for Abraham and for Sarah, and it's going to happen. God's already decided this was going to happen. God's been promising this for forever. And is anything too wonderful for God? What a beautiful way to say that. I have kids, and there's sometimes that you want to do something great. You want to really do something over the top for them. And maybe it's a sacrifice, maybe it's hard, but you really, really want to do it. I feel like this is that. Right? This is that emotion, that feeling, that space. Like, is anything too wonderful for me to do for my kids? No. If it's possible for me to do it, I want to do it. I want my kids to have wonderful lives. I mess it up. I do things that are not wonderful. But man, when I get a chance to do something actually wonderful, that's the good stuff. But this part of the story, I don't know. If you remember, we have transitioned from the sort of cosmic moments of the book of Genesis into the everyday stories, people's everyday lives. And that means we're looking for that kind of information, right? This story is about us and our everyday lives. And I think right here, we get something really insightful. At least I do. Abraham is sitting out under the trees. I don't know, maybe he dozed off, or maybe we're supposed to think these angel people just appeared. I don't know. Either way, Abraham looks up and sees these people, these three men, and I mean, he can do what he wants, right? He can sit there and just say, hey, how's it going? Now, he's supposed to be hospitable in this culture. And we're going to talk more about that hospitality in a moment. But he could have just done the bare minimum, right? He could have said, hey, how's it going? Can I help you with anything? Right? And maybe given them a sandwich or something. But that's not what he does here. And I think probably we get the sense that, I don't know, he had a sense of these men, that there was something going on here. And that is something that is very human. When we get the sense that something is happening, something's going on in our presence, and we don't quite know what it is. And my experience is that those are sort of fleeting moments. The wind blows a certain way. You smell something. You hear something, and you can just dismiss it. You can say, that was weird, or ignore it altogether. But if you're trying to, I don't know, live a bigger life, right? If you're trying in some way to be spiritual, to connect with God, I don't know how you want to say that, to connect with the universe, be aware, right? Be spiritually awake, have your spiritual eyes open. There's lots of ways that people describe it, but if that's what you are trying to do, the person you're trying to be, grow into, get back to, these are the moments that you have to pay attention to. The moments where the breeze changes in a certain way, or you get a chill. Like there are these moments, and if you are present in your life, if you are open to paying attention in these moments, you follow them. You see the rabbit poke its ears up, and you follow it down this weird trail. You lean into those moments, and it looks like, I don't know, all different kinds of things. I had one recently. My father passed. He played the guitar. I play the guitar. I inherited one of his guitars, the one that I remember him playing when I was a child, and it has the sound to it. And of course, I don't know, for whatever reason, it's in the basement, and it should be in my bedroom or someplace bigger, but it's not. It was in the basement and in its case, and the case fell over, and the guitar inside made the sound of my childhood. The tone, the strings just sort of rang out for just a minute. And normally I don't pay attention. I am not very good at being present. But in that moment, I was struck. I was struck by, there's something going on here. There's something more. And I sat down on the couch in my basement and was just there for a moment. And of course, there was something going on. I had memories of my dad, the good ones, the memories of him playing the guitar, but not just the guitar, the memories of walking down the road with him, asking him about Einstein and physics and all of the things. Like, I had this moment. It was like my dad was with me. And I don't know, maybe he was there. I was in a hard time, and it centered me and comforted me. Yeah. Abraham looks up, sees these men, and he gets a sense about it. And he leans in. He does the thing. And, at the end, the story it's humorous, it's fun, and there's nothing new. God's been promising Abraham that he's going to have lots of children. Sarah's been without children for a long time, and nothing new. But there is this wonderful experience, and we're going to see it leads to something important, like really important, that if Abraham hadn't paid attention to the sense that he got, this important thing would not have happened. And that's where leaning into those moments and trying to live a life that is aware of that is important. And training ourselves to pause and stop, even if we're in the middle of tidying up the basement, or, I was sweeping up in the basement. We can't let those moments pass, because those moments are often opportunities to grow, to expand our ability to sense and to feel, maybe to expand our understanding of God, or at the very least, it's a little gift. So the story now, getting back to this in Genesis chapter 18, we have the wonderful little beginning of how these men come to be with Abraham. And then in verse 16, it says, then the men set out from there and they looked towards Sodom. Now, we've been going for hours over the course of this podcast, and we may have forgotten the last time we were with Abram's nephew, Lot. It tells us that Lot is going to Sodom. And so when we read this, when the original readers heard this, they were like, oh no, they're going to where Abram's nephew is, where his kin is. And so it says that they look towards Sodom, and Abraham goes with them. Of course, they're going to where his nephew is. He wants to see what's going on. And there's this interesting conversation that God has with God's self. Like, should I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do? Because we're about to find out that he's going to destroy Sodom. But he doesn't. He doesn't. And the Lord says, how great is the outcry against Sodom and Gommorah, and how very grave their sin. Yeah. This is actually the beginning of some callbacks. We hear callbacks here. All these interesting the references to that earlier part of the book of Genesis, right, where we get the creation story, the Noah story, the Tower of Babel story, and this is one of those callbacks to the state that things were before the flood, but in the Noah story. This is a callback to the Noah story, and it's like it's supposed to give us a sense of how bad things were in Sodom and Gomorrah. It says, okay, look, this is intense. This is not good, and we know when that is not good like that, there's really not really great things that are going to happen. This is foreshadowing. It's the sinister music in the background calling back to the story of the flood. And we see it again in verse 21, another reference back to another story. I must go down and see whether they have done altogether according to the outcry that has come to me. Right? It says, I must go down. That's a callback to, if you remember the Tower of Babel, God is up in heaven and God comes down to look at what's going on. This is more of the sinister music, more of the callbacks to these older stories. And Abraham knows what's going down. He knows what goes on in Sodom and Gomorrah. Everybody knows what goes on in Sodom and Gomorrah, how horrible those people are. And so they when they start going down there, and Abraham now knows what's going to happen, he stops them. He sort of stands in between them. You get the sense of like they're walking and Abraham stands in between God, basically, and where his nephew is. And he starts to build an argument against destroying the Sodom and Gomorrah. And we know We know his relative is there, and we get it, right? And like if you heard that the place where your grandmother or your aunt was gonna have, you would try to stop that from happening. That's what Abraham does. He said, "What are you gonna do? You wouldn't be a righteous God if you destroyed good people, right? There's got to be good people." And Abraham's thinking, my nephew's there. He's a good person. Are you going to destroy all the good people along with the bad people? There's got to be 50. If there's 50 people, good people, will you spare the city? And God says, yes. Okay, if there's 50 people. And then it's a negotiation, right? It's faster than when you're negotiating in a car dealership. There's nobody going back to the manager asking for it. But Abraham negotiates God 50, 45, 40, 30, 20, 10 people. There's just 10 people that God is not going to destroy the city. And that's a huge thing. Abraham has talked God off of what God has said God was going to do. And then the rest of the story starts, right? That is in Genesis chapter 19. Just in case you didn't grasp it, what was going on with Abraham right at the beginning. 2 angels came to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gateway of Sodom. The gateway of Sodom, the gateway in these ancient Near Eastern towns, they are part of the public square, but sitting in the gateway is an important thing, right? In the gates to the cities, there were rooms, and the elders of the city, the most respected people, the wisest people of the city, would spend their days in the city gates. And the idea was that the person in the city gates was a person that you needed to ask information of, and being in their presence was a gift. There was this idea that if you had any decision that you needed to have, you would go to the city gates, you would ask the elders in the city gates, and if there was some little piece of information that would make it seem simple, you would avoid giving that information because you wanted to spend as much time with the elders at the city gates. That's the gift that it was. So when it says that Lot is there sitting in the city gates, oh man, there's all kinds of implications for the people who were hearing this, the initial readers. That's something that we all miss, this little nuance, but it's saying, Lot is a wise person. Lot is honored in that city. But there is an absence there because it appears that Lot is by himself in the city gates. And it's again a foreshadowing, because the question is, where are the other wise men? Where are the other good men? Where are the other honored and respected men of the city? Why are the city gates empty? Why is it only Lot? Then Lot greets these angels. And we have talked about this once before, but it's important to underscore that in this ancient world, there was a high prime value on hospitality. It's actually the way that culture was able to function, right? You would go from city to city when you were traveling, and you couldn't stay at a hotel. These cities didn't have hotels. Traveling was dangerous. And so when somebody showed up at the city gate, people would be there, would greet them, would give them a warm welcome, and would invite them into their house, invite them to water their horses, to feed them. That's the expectation. And that's because you needed protection. You didn't stay outside. Outside was dangerous. You made it to the city. When you got to the city, somebody let them stay with you. And so that's what Lot does. Lot does exactly what is expected of a person in that culture. Lot is seen at this point as a righteous person, as a person fulfilling his duty, but there's nobody else there. It shouldn't have just been Lot. There should have been multiple people greeting warmly these visitors that come in, but they're not there. They're not there. And Lot invites them in, and then after he invites them in, they say no, and he says, no. Come to my house. And they give in. They come to Lot's house. And then again, we get a note that Lot does the thing you're supposed to do. He feeds them. He feeds them a big feast, which is sort of echoing what Abraham did. And then it says, but before they laid down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both young and old, all the people to the last man surrounded the house. It sort of goes at length to underscore the fact that it's everybody there, every man there in Sodom, except Lot, is in this crowd, and the crowd is about to attempt something horrible. Really, remember, when you come to these cities, you should be protected. You should be safe. Hospitality is the key. And what they start saying is shocking. It says, where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us so that we may, and it says, know them. And again, this is a direct translation. Know them. This is a way of saying have sex with them. So let them come out here so that we can have sex with them. All of the men, to the every single person except for Lot, every man except for Lot is there calling Lot to put the men out so that they can have sex with them. Now, this is a place where more conservative, fundamentalist people will point to this and say, look, the sin of Sodom and Gommorah is homosexuality. It's not. First off, the idea of homosexuality is a modern idea, right? The word is a very recent word. The idea of people falling in love with each other, having committed relationships that are of the same gender. This is a modern concept, and you cannot take what the ancient texts talk about and then translate that into homosexuality, because that is a modern idea. It actually is the result of a whole lot of understanding and learning about the human psyche and about gender and about attraction and love. None of that was known, hundreds or thousands of years ago when these texts were being written, when these stories were being composed. This is not talking about homosexuality. And even if that's what it meant, this is still not that. They're not asking to let the men out so that they can get to know them and maybe they'll invite them home. No. This is gang rape. That is what is being proposed here. It is shocking. It's shocking all the time. It's shocking today if you heard that kind of proposal in a story. Gang rape. Put the men out here so that all of the men of Sodom, can rape them. That's what's happening here. And so it says Lot goes out there. He closes the door behind him. Right? Lot, again, puts himself in the same way Abraham put himself in between God and and his nephew Lot to try to save Lot. Lot puts himself in between, bodily in between these men who are trying to sexually assault people and the people they are trying to victimize. That's who Lot is. And so Lot says, don't act so wickedly. Don't do this thing. Lot is showing that he deserves to be at the city gate. He knows what's happening. He knows this is wrong. And then he says something shocking. It was shocking to the ancient world. It is shocking today. Lot goes out and he says, look, I've got 2 daughters that have not known a man. Again, we know what that word means. Have not had sex with a man. These are 2 virgin daughters. Let me bring them out to you and do as you please with them. Lot offers up his daughters in exchange for these men. It is crazy. It is awful. It is shocking. But the person who is writing here, there's 2 things going on, and we're going to talk about the second one in a little bit. But one of the things that is going on is the writer here is saying, look. Lot was being so hospitable that he offered the most precious thing he could offer to try to protect these men. And then they say, stand back. We're going to do worse with you than with them. And at that moment, they sort of press Lot against the door, almost broke it down, and the men inside, the angels, reach out, grab Lot, reached out their hands, brought Lot into the house with them, and shut the door. And this right here, this actually is another one of the callbacks. It's actually a callback to the Noah story. It says, right then at the end of the story with the doves, when the waters are receding, Noah puts out his hand and brought the dove into the ark with him. It's as Noah cared for the dove, they rescue Lot. They care for Lot. And you also get the sense that like Noah and the dove is the same as these angels and these men. Right? The angels are far more wise than Lot. They know so much more than Lot. They're caring for Lot. They stop Lot from doing something horrible, right? They stop that from happening. And then it says they made the men that are outside, they struck them all with blindness. And again, there's a little bit of a humorous element. You get the sense that the men are all bumping into each other, bumbling. They can't find their way. And then the men say, look, you got to get out of here, Lot. Take all the people, your daughters, all the people, because we're about to destroy this place. And it's Lot goes and starts getting him up. And then the morning dawns and get up, take your wife, your daughters, right? Or else you're going to be consumed and run to the hills. And you get a sense now that Lot is panicked. Of course, there is destruction coming and Lot says, I can't go to the hills. Like, the hills are dangerous, and that's true. That's part of the danger in traveling. There were animals in the hills. There were robbers in the hills, like the thieves. The bad people would live there and would take advantage of travelers. Lot said, could you just spare this? There's a one little city. There's actually, the city's name is Zoar, which actually is the root of the word is little. Like it's like the city named Little, but it's a little city. There's a little city over there. Just spare that city. Let us go there. And the angels say, yes, go, but don't look back. Don't look back. And then they run out. They're going to the little city And yeah, Lot's wife looks back. She looks back. It's scholars think that this part of the story likely grew out of a salt deposit, a salt shape, a large salt. It's like a column of salt in that area that resembled a person. So that's part of how this part of the story came about. But she looks back. And the looking back is not just she glanced over her shoulder. Looking back is symbolic, like everything is in these stories. Like everything is. She looked back. She was thinking about going back. She was part of those people in a deeper way, right? She was part of the problem. She had become the same as the people who were being destroyed in some way, in some small part. And so she ends up sharing their fate. Fire, brimstone. She turns to a pillar of salt. Yeah. And so we get the end of the story of Sodom and Gommorah. The sin of the Sodom and Gommorah is not people of the same gender having sex with each other. And if you are still skeptical about that, there's actually a verse in Ezekiel, you can look it up, that says the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah was their lack of hospitality. Yeah. But again, we're in the everyday life part of this book. And we get a sense of ourself here. Right? Sometimes you find yourself in Sodom and Gomorrah. All of a sudden, one day you wake up and you are surrounded by people doing horrible things. And maybe you know how you got there. Maybe you remember choosing the nicer area when you had, and you thought it was nicer. You thought you were getting an advantage, and you show up there. And then one day you turn around and you say, wait a second, this isn't nice. This isn't good. These people are doing awful things. And the problem is, the human part of that is when you are around that, your threshold for what is bad starts to creep up, right? You get used to it. You get, I don't know, little by little, your threshold for what is bad creeps up, and yeah, it's not good, because all of a sudden you're standing outside the door trying to do something good, and you suggest something horrible. Maybe you catch yourself right then, maybe not, because the world around you has made horrible things seem normal and everyday. The blinding of these men, one of the symbols there is that the angels are causing a physical manifestation of what is going on inside of them, that they are spiritually blind. They can't see anymore the right path. And that happens We get to places where we are spiritually blind, where we lose our way. And sometimes it's because we have found ourselves surrounded by the wrong people, right? We found ourselves in a city that we don't belong in. And little by little, our sight is lost and we lose our way. We bumble around and stumble and knock into stuff because we've stopped being able to see. And what happens is that at some point we hear ourselves say something that we never would have said before. We see ourselves doing something that we would never have done before. And in that moment, we have to catch ourselves, or we have to be caught by somebody else. Somebody who still has their sight, who still has their wisdom. We've got to listen to those people when they say, hey, you are off track. You've lost your way. Stop. Don't do this. Stop. We need to let them be like Noah caring for the dove. Trust them with our life and let them protect us. Let them help us restore our sight. And then when we have our sight, when they have rescued us, when our eyes are open, it's time to go in a different direction, to turn around and just get the heck out of Dodge. But it's important. Because when you're doing that, when you've just gotten your sight back, there's this human tendency to not do the hard thing, to not run away, and just to go back to where you once were. Yeah. Because we do that. Sometimes we're Lot. We run all the way to the little city and we rebuild our lives. Sometimes we're Lot's wife. We look back. We go back to the place. We lose our sight again. We hurt our lives again. Because this story is about us. And then there's times when we're strong. Like there's times in our lives where we feel spiritually strong. We've got our sight. Our eyes are wide open. We have an awakened brain. When the wind shifts and we get the sense of the thing, we're in a place where we lean in, where we pay attention, where the bigness of our soul, of our awareness, of our experience is expansive and we are open. And when we are in those places, it's time for us to also be the angels. Not to go out and to yell at the street corner and to tell people how horrible they are, but to grab hold of their shoulders and say, hey, come in here. Let me help you. Let me save you let me help you. It's possible. You can stop. Look, this is the way. This is the path that you need to go down. Go right over there. Go to that city. Go to the hills. I'll help you. I'll help you out. I'll hold back whatever the destruction that's about to happen. Like we can stand in front of them. We can hold it off so that they can move away from it. I've seen people do this. A family member has gotten way off track. They've made some bad financial decisions, and their family members say, actually, hey, hey, you gotta get stuff together. Let me help you out, but let me show you how to budget. or worse, somebody is addicted and their family, instead of turning their backs on them, the people who have sight grab their shoulders and say, look, we don't want you to hurt yourself like this anymore. And I know that you don't fully understand it, but let us help you. Let us get you into a treatment facility, into a program. Yeah. Sometimes you're Lot and you've got to listen to people. Sometimes you're the angel and you've got to use your resources to help people. Yeah. So look, we are right now, it depends on when you're listening to this, but we are in December. And so we're going to pause. We've gotten to this point in the book of Genesis. The next little book club time is going to be in the more Christmassy time. So we're going to do some Christmas stuff. I'm going to tell you about how they came up with December 25th. We're going to talk about the whole Christmas tree thing and how beautiful that story is. We're going to talk about some of that. It's going to be a lot of fun over the next couple of weeks. You should stay here and you should actually, you should really be part of our community. We have this community that we call Not Church. It's on Discord, and this is a book club, and in that we talk about what happens in the podcast. We discuss these things. We go deep together. We are there for each other. It's like church, but it's not church. All the people there are trying to engage with God, find spiritual beliefs and practices that work for them, and wherever they find them. But there aren't people in there that are telling you you're going to hell because of your beliefs or your practices. That's not what we do. We are there for each other. The person that helped us with this name said it's like church. It's not church. It's like church, but everything you wanted without the stuff that is damaging and caused you all that trauma. If you want to be part of that, you can go to patreon.com/skepticpastor. It's $3 a month. We charge for it because we're not going to ask you to give 10% of your income or any of that kind of stuff. Also, we have a merch store, which is really funny. The descriptions are worth the whole thing. I'll read you one of the descriptions. One of the descriptions of a product. It's this product that says, take the Bible seriously, not literally. And it's a tumbler. It says, sip your morning coffee while silently reminding your evangelical coworker that Jonah didn't actually live in a fish condo for 3 days. This tumbler is perfect for those who take scripture as seriously as they take their caffeine. Nuanced, layers, and definitely not watered down. There's a lot of fun products, of fun merch on here, but it's worth just going and reading these hilarious product descriptions. You can go to that. That's noomacommunity.com/store. noomacommunity.com. That's NOOMA community.com/store. It's hilarious. I hope you can do that. All of that just supports our work here when you buy stuff. So noomacommunity.com/store. Also, and last thing, wherever you find this podcast, give us a good rating. That really helps. That's it. That's the podcast. Shout out to the Choir Network, to Patheos, to Matthew and Keith, who make everything happen. Now, get out of here. Go do something to make the world a better place. Okay? We'll see you next time.